Is drinking raw milk safe like RFK Jr. suggests? Can you reduce a glucose spike if you eat your food in, quote-unquote, the right order? I'm registered dietitian Abby Sharp. I host a nutrition myth-busting podcast called Bite Back with Abby Sharp, and those are just some of the questions I tackle with qualified experts on my show. There is so much food misinformation and disinformation out there, and it can feel impossible to know what's real and what's BS. On Bite Back, my goal is to help listeners create a pleasurable relationship with food, their body, and themselves, which in my opinion is the fundamental secret to good health. Listen to Bite Back wherever you get your podcasts.
See what you can find. If a daddy's rich, take her out for a meal. If a daddy's poor, just do what you feel. Speed along the lane, you can turn or return at 25. When the sun goes down, you can make it good and live by. We're not great people, we're not dirty, we're not mean. We love everybody, but we do as we please. When the weather's fine, we go fishing or go sailing in the sea. We're always happy, lives we live in, yeah, that's our philosophy. Sing along with us, dee-dee-dee-dee-dee, da-da-da-da-da, yeah, we're happy, da-da-da-da.
All right, so when we get into the da-da-da-dee-dee-dee stuff, we'll tell you that it's Mungo Jerry, but you knew that already. On this day in 1970, 55 years ago today, Mungo Jerry took that song in the summertime to number one on the UK singles chart. It went on in the summertime, the single by Mungo Jerry, to become the best-selling UK single of that year, 1970, and spent 7 weeks at number one. Was also a hit in 26 other countries. I couldn't resist that song today for two reasons. One, because it feels as though, even though we have not yet reached the summer solstice, that we are into the summer. The weather has been absolutely spectacular, and I feel it's necessary for me to point out how much I've been enjoying it, because Lord knows I complained enough through the month of May and all of the months before that in this godforsaken weather year. But the last number of weeks have been absolutely sensational. Really been enjoying it. And the other reason that this song, when I saw it on my list of notable songs on this day in music history, that I knew I had to play it, is because I was hanging out with my best bud on Saturday. We were enjoying the weather on the back deck. Before it got a little cool for our liking, we went inside and watched the hockey game. Anyway, as we were sitting there, what came over the speaker but Mungo Jerry and In the Summertime? And my buddy said, were they a one-hit wonder? I'm like, you know what? I'm not really sure. Well, now I get the opportunity to tell you, and I don't think my buddy's listening, but I'll remind him later. No, in fact, Mungo Jerry had 9, count them, 9 charting singles in the UK, including 2 number ones, 5 top 20 hits in South Africa, of all places, and 4 that made the top 100 here in Canada. So not one-hit wonders. Hey, good Monday morning. It is the 16th of June, 2025. Welcome to the program. Thank you very much for stopping by. I know we have friends, a.k.a. listeners, in Listowel. And so if you are listening from Listy, or if you are in Listowel, you live there and commute somewhere else for work, I want to make sure that you are aware of the Lichties, David and Marianne, to be exact. I saw this note in the paper on the weekend, and I just had to share because I know we've got some love from Listowel here on the show. David and Marianne Lichty will, on Wednesday of this week, the 18th of June, celebrate, are you ready for it, their 65th wedding anniversary. 65 years married this Wednesday are David and Marianne Lichty of Listowel. If you're in Listy And you know the lichties of Listy. You see what I did there? Make sure you give them a hearty congratulations for 65 years of marriage. That's incredible. Good job. And a beautiful picture in the weekend paper. Also this weekend, just want to take a quick moment to send a huge thank you to the Barry family of Barry's Asparagus Farm and Country Store in Cambridge, very close to North Dumfries. You know Barry's, the best place to get asparagus and so many other things in that country store, including the Farwell family favorite coffee, Blacksmith and Bean. If you have not tried it, I highly recommend it. Great stuff, and it's a local product for you. But the Barrys have long been incredible supporters of our Farwell for Hire fundraising campaign, along with Brad and Christine Schmuck, of course, of the Schmuck Truck fame, the food truck that you know so well. We had our deep fried asparagus event yesterday. The final event. I promise you're not going to have to hear me talk about Farwell for Hire anymore after today. Well, maybe not. Maybe just a little bit more. But yesterday was our final event, and we are so grateful to those families, the Barrys and the Schmucks, for helping us have this annual fundraiser, and then you for coming out and supporting in the manner that you did. I saw so many friendly faces. There were so many kind words exchanged. It's just what a community we have there south of the 401. And I know you came from Kitchener and Waterloo as well. Some folks from Listowel were there, but it was just great. And by the end of the day, we had collected more than $4,000. Good thing I didn't get mugged on the way home, huh? More than $4,000 more for our Farwell for Hire fundraising campaign this year. So we've got a little bit of accounting to do, couple more loose ends to tie up, and I hope later this week we will be able to announce our final fundraising total for this year. But thanks to everyone who made yesterday's deep fried asparagus event a resounding success. So much fun on the farm.
It's the final countdown.
Okay, to your Farwell Show 5 for this Monday morning, number 1. Got your popcorn ready? It is a must-see meeting today between Prime Minister Mark Carney and U.S. President Donald Trump at the G7 summit in Alberta. The talk comes as both leaders are trying to resolve an economic spat caused, of course, by Trump's tariffs. It's also Trump's first visit to Canada since he began saying our country should become an American state. Carney also leading discussions today on safety issues and artificial intelligence while meeting with leaders from countries including Japan, France, and Italy. Number 2, Canada's largest private sector union says former Canadian Auto Workers President Buzz Hargrove has died. Unifor calls Basil Buzz Hargrove a, quote, beloved and iconic figure in Canada's labour movement. He was national president of the CAW from 1992 until his retirement in 2008. Hargrove began his working life on the shop floor of Chrysler's assembly plant in Windsor. Number 3 on your Farwell Show 5 this morning, Ontario's Minister of Sport makes a stop today in Kitchener. Neil Lumsden will join the mayors of Kitchener, Waterloo, and Wilmot for an announcement at the new RBJ Schlegel Park. Following the provincial announcement, the city of Kitchener will host a ceremonial beam signing at the construction site of its future indoor recreation complex. It's part of a busy day in Kitchener that also includes council discussions on renovations and expansion of the Rockway Community Centre and speed cameras. Mayor Barry Verbanovic joins the show at 9:30. Number 4 on your Farwell Show 5 this morning, the man suspected of killing a Minnesota lawmaker and wounding another has been taken into custody, ending a nearly 2-day search. Vance Bolter was arrested Sunday evening. Former Democratic House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark were killed in their home early Saturday, while Senator John Hoffman, also a Democrat, and his wife Yvette were injured at their home about 15 kilometers away. The violence has been described as politically motivated. And number 5 on your Farwell Show 5 this Monday morning, back-to-back weekend losses for your Kitchener Panthers, who managed just one run in each of their weekend games. On Friday, the Panthers were pounded 8-1 in London, and yesterday, Brantford blasted Kitchener 12-1. The Panthers are home to Hamilton on Thursday. And that is your Farwell Show 5 to start your day on this Monday morning. we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, it's your morning wake-up call. And inspired by some students in Woolwich Township, I have arrived at the answer. Thank you to the young people for pointing at least me in the direction, and I will share with you, I think I have the answer to our speed camera problems. And it's actually pretty simple. Thanks to the students for getting us on the right path here. I'll tell you what I think the answer is to our speed camera woes coming up on the Mike Farwell Show. Your morning wake-up call on 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. I hereby nominate the grade 2 class at St. John's Kilmarnock School on Shant Station Road as the next candidates for municipal council, because these grade 2 students have figured out the answer to our speed camera problems. These youngsters in grade 2 started a petition. It's got more than 250 signatures, so clearly it's gone beyond just their grade 2 class at St. John's Kilmarnock. It's been picked up by Woolwich Township Council, who are bringing it forward and passing a motion in support of the petition, including a letter of support to be sent to the region. And what is it that these youngsters have noticed on the rural road that leads to their school, Shant Station? Well, they've noticed that people won't even adhere to the 60 kilometer per hour posted speed limit. So what the students in grade 2 would like is the establishment of a community safety zone, so people who are speeding would at least be reminded, hey, speeder, the limit here is 60. And when I read that story in my weekend paper, a little light bulb went off. I think this is the answer to our speed camera problems. And I'd love to know what you think at 519-570-2545, star 570, or 1-800-570-5715. What these students in grade 2 are asking for is that people drive at the posted limit. The challenge we are having, I think there are multiple, but I think one of the big challenges we are having with our speed camera program and rollout here in the region is that the speed limits being enforced seem somewhat arbitrary, don't they? These kids aren't saying take the 60 kilometer per hour limit and lower it to 40. They're saying, hey, drive the speed limit. In these areas where we have school zones, community safety zones, and speed limits drop from 80 to 60 to even 50, 40, 30 in some places, it seems rather arbitrary, doesn't it? Those new speed limits that have been created and are then being enforced by automated technology. I'll remind you of something we talked about on the show last week, an intersection in Kitchener that the region is looking at making some safety improvements to, because that intersection has seen 17 collisions over the past 5 years. We can have a discussion as to how dangerous that makes it, an average of about 3 collisions per year. But the bottom line is there's a data point here. 17 collisions, 5 years, we want to make some safety improvements. There is no data point around making a certain zone of our community a safety zone or a school zone, other than the fact that there is a building there, a school building, or there are children in the neighborhood, which pretty much applies to every neighborhood these days in our very busy city, doesn't it? There are children everywhere in the city. So what is the data point other than the existence of children and or school buildings for seemingly arbitrarily creating a 30 or 40 kilometer per hour speed zone? There's no data point there. It's not based on data. It's based on emotion. Won't anybody think of the children? So my proposed solution to the speed camera problem is simply you can put a speed camera wherever you want to enforce the speed limit. Because where you have lowered these speed limits, seemingly arbitrarily, there are no data points to support the lowering of that speed limit. There are no collisions to talk about. There are no deaths and serious injuries on these roads. If you've got the data that says there's been this many serious injuries or deaths, we need to work on safety improvements over here, fine. Use the data to inform the decision. Otherwise, it's all just emotional without the necessary data. You can put a speed limit on or a speed camera on every street in this community to enforce the 50 kilometer per hour limit or the 60 kilometer per hour limit. Fill your boots, enforce the speed limit. Don't create a new arbitrary speed limit that then is enforced 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, including on weekends, holidays, summer break, etc. The kids in grade 2 at St. John's Kilmarnock have figured this out. Here's the posted speed limit. Drive that speed limit. Put a speed camera on every street as long as you're enforcing the speed limit, not some arbitrary number you decided to come up with that didn't have the backing of data. I think we just solved the speed camera problem. Thoughts? Always welcome on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. I really don't like making mistakes. I mean, especially in this line of work, accuracy is important. But there's no edit feature on the social media platform X. I still call it Twitter most of the time. Like, do you still put out a tweet or do you just make a post on X? Anyway, my daily post on X contains a typo and I feel really bad for it. But I'm not about to pay for a subscription that allows me to edit. I guess I could have deleted and reposted. Anyway, my topic for 10:30 says, artists make us of empty office space. When you're reading that, it probably catches you. What are they making us out of? It's supposed to say use. I'm all about responsibility, accountability, transparency on this show. So in the interests of full disclosure and transparency, I made a typo. I didn't catch it in time. I could edit it for Facebook because Facebook lets you do that. But on the X platform, it says artists make us of empty office space. It's supposed to say use. I wanted to make that clear to you and apologize for the typo. I can't stand it when I make little mistakes like that. Those things matter. When you read that now, you're like, what's this knucklehead doing? Forgetting the E on the end of the word use. And there are only 3 letters like that. Anyway, I think you'll enjoy that conversation about an hour from now because creative people are making creative use, not us, but use of empty spaces in Waterloo. That's 60 minutes from now. Right now, I'm going to send you to the 570 News Centre for an update. And then it's a busy day for Kitchener Council. We're talking about an expanded Rockway Community Centre. We're talking about a renoviction bylaw or not. We're talking about speed cameras. Kitchener Mayor Barry Verbanovic joins us right after this on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. It is a busy day for councillors in the city of Kitchener with a number of interesting and in some cases maybe controversial items for discussion. The most controversial, I think, would be a renoviction bylaw. Staff report coming to council recommends not creating a renoviction bylaw for the city of Kitchener, and that will be the subject of protests and rallies outside of Kitchener City Hall ahead of tonight's council meeting. But let's get into many of the issues that Kitchener Council will be grappling with today as we are joined by the mayor of the city, Barry Verbanovic. Mayor Verbanovic, good Monday morning, sir.
Happy Monday and happy belated Father's Day, Mike. Great to talk to you.
Thank you very much for making the time and for the kind words. I know this is a very busy day for you. And before we get to renovations, let's start, if we could, with the Rockway Community Centre, because I know that particular community centre, the oldest in the city, maybe holds a special place in the hearts of many. And what the city, I think, is looking at is perhaps building something new, but not too far away from the current community centre.
Yeah, very exciting proposal and report coming forth from staff. As you know, we've been looking at Rockway. It's an old building. It's tired. We've maintained it as best as we could, but it really needs to be replaced and updated. And so there is a report coming forward that calls for a request for proposals that would see a new 21 to 26,000 square foot facility built, including up to 1,600 square feet of outdoor space. It would be close to the LRT and bus routes, a double sport gymnasium, dedicated multi-purpose rooms for fitness programming, crafts, a large multi-purpose room, a large lobby space with a cafe, all sorts of great things. The idea is to really look at it either being located at the current site or on properties that are 1.5 kilometers from the current site.
Is this really a new way of doing business in some ways for a municipality when it comes to looking for a development partner for something like this?
Well, listen, the city's had a long history of partnerships in many, many projects. If you think about Forest Heights Pool, for example, that partnered originally with the school and Kitchener Public Library. Subsequent to that, we have libraries both at Country Hills and at Grand River and at St. Mary's. Country Hills is at St. Mary's, that have partnered with the school boards. And so, it just makes good sense for everyone and creates a one-stop shop that people can use for different purposes.
On the renoviction issue, Mayor Verbanovic, I alluded to at the outset, maybe the most controversial of the issues that you'll be discussing today. I know the staff report recommends Kitchener not create a renoviction bylaw. How do you feel about the city's role in protecting tenants against unscrupulous landlords?
Listen, Mike, this is, you're absolutely right in saying this is probably going to be the most difficult issue on the agenda today. What we're seeing some of these landlords doing is nothing short of unscrupulous and totally goes against any of the values that you or I or decent people have been raised with. And so, we obviously have a role, as does the provincial and federal governments, but the primary role really lies with the provincial government, as all things around tenancies, rents, and so on is primarily their responsibility. We have seen a few cities who have put bylaws in place. They've done that against the advice of their staff, but have implemented them anyway. And so, our staff, looked at it very closely and are making a similar recommendation. I think council is listening strongly to all the views, and quite frankly, the real impact that's being felt by people that in our community, sometimes people that we know, and it's heartbreaking. And so really grappling with what the right answer is. I think it's fair to say, and I can't predict how this is going to land tonight, but what I can say is that council is unified in their disdain for what they're seeing and wanting to see solutions. I think where the struggle is, what's our role versus what's the province's role, and not giving false hope to residents by taking something on that perhaps isn't within our mandate.
Is that then to suggest that perhaps the best role for the municipality is to advocate on behalf of tenants to the province?
Listen, that's something we have been doing and we'll continue to do. The report actually, looks to us, it refers to it as some Path 2 initiatives, and that's actually taking a more significant role in terms of making sure that that tenants are aware of their rights, that tenants are supported in terms of acting on their rights, and so on. But the report doesn't suggest going the route of a bylaw. But as I say, I think council has been listening hard to the many people we're hearing from on this and the lived experience stories. And I anticipate we'll hear from more this evening. And ultimately, council is going to make a decision here. And but without question, we will continue to advocate and put pressure on the province in this regard.
Certainly something to keep our ears and eyes on tonight at Council. One more thing on the agendas today that caught my eye, Mayor Verbanovic, is around speed cameras. And speaking of the province, the report coming before the committee today makes reference to Ontario Premier Doug Ford and how he has soured a little bit, or has at least sounded sour on speed cameras. And Kitchener has requested of the region that it, as a municipality, go its own way and kind of break free from the regional speed camera program. Why is that important to you?
You know, listen, Mike, I mean, this is something that you and I have, I think, both been quite frustrated about. You know, as of many others. I can't tell you the number of people I hear from, and without a doubt, speeding and people's driving habits in this region, and quite frankly across Ontario, post-COVID, have become atrocious, and people need to slow down. However, you know, I think our council and our community is saying 24/7, 365 cameras in 170 spots is not the answer. And if you were following regional council last week, you know, we heard that part of the reason they want to build a new $60 to $100 million courthouse is to actually be able to process the court time for another, you know, almost 800,000 tickets that they anticipate will be getting issued by 2027. That's not the kind of community that I want to build. And I think, you know, we want to make sure that we have a system in place that meets the safety needs of our community, that works with WRPS where it makes sense to actually have in-person enforcement, because it does. We can't lose sight of the fact that actually in-person enforcement often finds other things like drugs, like intoxicated drivers, and so on. So that still needs to be a priority. And then, you know, looking at the best way to implement it for Kitchener ratepayers going forward that makes sense.
Mayor Verbanovic, as always, appreciate the time you make for us on the show. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Mike. Have a great week.
You as well. Bye-bye. Kitchener Mayor Barry Verbanovic joining us to talk about a busy day ahead for Kitchener Council, and that's included with Provincial Minister Neil Lumsden, Ontario's Minister of Sport, will be here in Kitchener today for an announcement at the RBJ Schlegel Park. Mayor Verbanovic, along with his counterparts, Mayor Dorothy McCabe of Waterloo, Mayor Natasha Salonen of Wilmot, will all be on hand for that announcement today by Ontario's Minister of Sport. And that's before we get to all of those issues and more through council and committee meetings in Kitchener today. The rebuilt, renovated, redesigned Rockway Centre would become the largest in the city of Kitchener. Renoviction bylaws to create or not create such a bylaw, and then the speed camera issue. No shortage of things to discuss today for Kitchener Council, as is the case on this show. There's never a shortage of things for us to talk about on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
That's actually taking a more significant role in terms of making sure that tenants are aware of their rights, that tenants are supported, but the report doesn't suggest going the route of a bylaw. But as I say, I think council has been listening hard to the many people we're hearing from on this, but without question, we will continue to advocate and put pressure on the province in this regard.
Kitchener Mayor Barry Verbanovic joining us to talk about a busy day for council in Kitchener. And Devin Robertson, our guy on the other side of the glass here at the radio station, picked out the perfect clip. We talked with Mayor Verbanovic about three different issues. One is the redevelopment and potential relocation within 1.5 kilometers of the existing Rockway Centre, but in partnership with a developer, something that could become the biggest community centre in the city. Then we've got the speed camera issue, and as you know, the city of Kitchener, much like North Dumfries Township, has broken away from the region's plan and says, hey, we want to do our own thing as a municipality. And then from the clip you just heard about the creation of, or perhaps not the creation of, a renoviction bylaw in the city. And that part of the conversation really struck me because, frankly, I like what Mayor Verbanovic said insofar as not creating any sort of false sense of hope for tenants facing renoviction, that the city actually has within its power or purview the ability to stop it. It sounded to me, based on what I heard in that conversation with Mayor Verbanovic, that municipalities that have enacted or created renoviction bylaws really don't have any teeth in them, so it becomes something that's there on paper only. And so this gets me thinking about a couple of things here. One is, as you know, I'm a big fan of stay in your lane politics, right? And don't go essentially even wasting your time on things that are not within your purview. You've got plenty of work to do in the municipality. And if you don't, I'm sure we can find some for you, right? There are lots of roads and traffic calming issues and all kinds of different things we can work on and worry about within the city and within the direct control of a municipal government. And make no mistake, I am not in any way condoning the actions of a landlord who engages in a bad faith renoviction. A renoviction essentially is a tenant that gets displaced from the apartment unit they've been living in for however long a time based on some flimsy premise of renovation. Sometimes it might even just be a quick coat of paint. But once that tenant has been displaced, then they don't get to come back except at a higher rent, or they don't get to come back at all because the landlord uses it for a family member or any other such thing. It seems in that case that it is advantage landlord to use this renovation ruse, if you will, as an excuse to get somebody out of an apartment that they either want for somebody that is a member of their family, or they want to turn back into the market, which is now generating far higher rents than what that current tenant is paying. That's a bad faith move. It's not the kind of thing that I don't think many of us will support or could get behind. But is it the municipality's job to interfere in something like that? Does the municipality even have a role other than connecting that tenant to the necessary resources or advocating to the province? Which brings me to another thing that I've always found interesting in local politics. So I'm a stay in your lane guy. You in the city, you at the region, you provincially, you federally, you stay in your lane and deal with the things that are under your direct control. The other thing, though, is I find it so interesting that municipal politics and municipal elections are the elections that attract the fewest voters, right? The lowest voter turnout is at a municipal election, when that level of government is the level of government that impacts you most directly on a daily basis. And lo and behold, we're going to have a rally outside Kitchener City Hall tonight before this council meeting because people are saying you must create a renoviction bylaw, even though it would probably be toothless. So where's the rally outside the local offices of our 5 MPPs, 3 of whom are members of the current Conservative government? We find this municipal government, the one that we don't show up to vote for, but we find municipal government the most accessible. So sure, we'll go to Kitchener City Hall and hold our rally tonight, but outside the MPP's offices, nope. For whatever reason, MPPs and MPs get shielded from the vast majority of this, and municipal councils and municipal councillors are the ones that hear it all because they are the most accessible. So the voter turnout is the lowest, but they remain the most accessible. And whatever our problem is, whether it's the city's problem to solve or not, we'll take our concern to their doorstep. Fascinating stuff from where I'm sitting. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Just ahead of our 10 a.m. update, let's go to the phones. Always love hearing from you on the show. Paul, good morning.
Morning. Listen, government of all levels, municipal, regional, provincial, federal, should stay out of the business of private investors. Somebody invests money. Hey, if I invest money in the stock market, is the government going to tell me that since I decided that a company was no longer profitable and I didn't want to invest in it, that I shouldn't be allowed to sell or dispose of that property?
But they'll take your capital gains. They'll take your capital gains.
Oh, you're damn right they will.
Okay, so they are interfering to a point, just so we're clear.
Right.
Okay.
And if there's a loss, you can also claim that capital loss.
Good point.
But as far as the day-to-day operation of a private business, the municipal government should stay the hell out of it.
Okay. But you know what, Paul? You say that as a scrupulous landlord. You would not take advantage of a tenant.
So?
Oh, no, I'm just, that's the problem is not everybody would conduct their business the way you do. That's all. But I'm with you that there are lanes to stay in here.
When somebody invests their life savings into a rental property and plans on using that for their retirement, when the time comes when they want to dispose of it, they should have every right to dispose of it, and they should have it free and clear, not have to pass along some tenant who's sitting there for the last 20 years at a minimal rental rate.
I got you, but
only been able to put up a few percentage points.
But that's not a renoviction. If you sell your building, you sell your building. Nobody's going to stop you from doing that.
No, but you can't get the tenant out. You got to sell it with the tenant in there, and that detracts from the value because if they're if they're on a lease and they're paying $1,000 a month, when you sell that property, that tenant gets to stay there. Who wants to buy a piece of property that where the fair market value is, $2,500 a month, but you can only collect $1,000 a month because you can't get that tenant out of there?
I got you. I hear where you're coming from, and I got to get to the update from the 570 News Center. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. The Ontario government wants to unleash the provincial economy. In fact, that is the name of the recent legislation. Protect Ontario by Unleashing Our Economy Act. And what it would do is create special economic zones in Ontario where provincial rules and regulations would be exempt so that you could get development done more quickly. It has met with widespread opposition, including in the city of Guelph, where Councillor for Ward 5, Leanne Caron, joins the show this morning to talk about it. Leanne, good morning.
Good morning. It's always a pleasure to talk about things like this with you, Mike.
Well, I enjoy the time to talk with you as well, Leanne, because you are a passionate voice, and in this case, you articulate rather well your concerns with Bill 5. Can you share those with us this morning?
Well, where do I begin? I mean, there's just so many layers of wrong to Bill 5 and Bill 17, but we'll stick with Bill 5. Special economic zones give the province a sweeping unleashing of power that is contrary to the rule of law. It exempts the province from so many different regulations, the Endangered Species Act, the environmental protections for water, Indigenous treaty obligations. It overrides municipal land use planning authority. It completely abolishes public consultation, laws designed to protect human health and safety, labor laws. So, when you have a government who is abandoning all of the laws that we have put into place to protect human health, to protect our Indigenous partners, to protect workers, you have to shake your head and ask, what's the benefit? And if the benefit is a fast buck or under the guise of building more housing, there's no evidence to demonstrate that is going to happen. And even if this was an economic argument, are we willing to break our own laws in order to? I know right now the topic is the Ring of Fire mining rights, but again, the damage that is done to override all of those laws just does not seem a good return on investment or an appropriate process. We look down to the south and we see what kind of lawlessness and exemption from the law the government is taking, where the president is exempt from the law. Is that the route we want to go in the province of Ontario? I think not. I think the people of Ontario would say no, thank you.
I think your point is really well taken around the lack of evidence that this would be an economic boon beyond just a fast buck. The reality, though, of course, Leanne, as I know you know well as a councillor in Guelph, is that we are behind on meeting our housing targets, our targets for home building, and we need housing desperately. Can we get that housing that we need so desperately done without a bill like this?
Absolutely. And when I look back at the legislation that's already been passed by this government in the previous term, Bill 23, Bill 124, the development charges being waived, density targets being waived. We in Guelph have passed 4 units as of right on every residential property. I mean, we've already unleashed a whole bunch of legislative actions that are designed to build more housing, and guess what? It's not working. Ontario has the second lowest housing starts of any province in this country, and we're the most populated province. So those bills aren't working. So I have no confidence that Bill 5 is going to do anything to build more housing.
So as a council, I know that you have agreed that Bill 5 ought not move forward. Are you advocating then to the province to not enact this legislation? Where does that land?
Well, our actions at the municipal level are very limited. We've written a letter to the province asking them to repeal Bill 5. When we put this on our agenda, Bill 5 was not in effect, and by the time it got to the agenda, Bill 5 had been passed on the last day of the legislature for 2025 for the summer. They don't reconvene until late September, early October, so it was fast-tracked. They cut off debate for the bill, so it is now in effect. And that worries me because, as I said, we don't know where these special economic zones are. The bill passed without even knowing where these special zones are going to exist. All we know is that the Premier and his ministers are the definition of the people who are going to make the decision on who trusted proponents are. We don't know who's going to be given rights to these special economic zones, and yet the bill has passed without knowing any of that. So, that worries me. We create laws to protect our citizens. We create laws to protect future generations from greed, from the rich and powerful forces that hold themselves above the law. And here we are now with Bill 5 in effect and no summer session to debate or stop it from moving forward. So our letter to the province was just, please repeal it. We can do better. We can come up with another way of creating those economic zones without abandoning the rule of law.
And of course, not knowing where those economic zones may be created leads to a great deal of uncertainty for a councillor such as yourself. And I know, Leanne, that anybody who follows politics closely recognizes and has probably heard the phrase before, municipalities are but a creature of the province. It's like the province is the parent, the municipality is the child. How is that relationship working currently under this particular premier and this particular government in Ontario?
Well, it's not working well. In the 1850s, when the Municipal Act first set out those level of responsibilities, municipalities were little rural villages scattered around a province where, a big York government in York was needed for municipalities to have services and be able to, levy taxes. It's 2025, and we're all grown up now. We're a very urban area, at least in southern Ontario, and we don't need a big government in the province to micromanage every single thing we do. And land use planning is under a municipal responsibility for a reason, and that's because we know our communities. It gives our residents an opportunity to have a say in the planning process. we think of Bill 5, it's all about the ring of fire and mining rights, but it's not. It could very much affect the Greenbelt. We know that this premier and this previous Conservative government tried to unleash the Greenbelt for development. People Power said no, and that was repealed. But Bill 5 could start that all over again. Bill 5 could create the Greenbelt as a special economic zone, and even closer to home in the KW and Guelph region. In Guelph, we have a Guelph Innovation District on the former lands of the Ontario Reformatory. That is provincially owned. If the government says that that's a special economic zone, we've spent a decade here in Guelph doing land use planning for that economic zone. We've got an award-winning and secondary plan embedded in our official plan. To completely ignore the wishes of the municipality sets a really bad example for municipal and provincial relationships. I do think you've asked a really great question, because it's not just Guelph; it's every municipality in Ontario, and we're well past needing big government in the city of York to be telling municipalities what they should be doing. I think what we do need is stronger cities. We need stronger municipal oversight. We need the government to take the Municipal Act and turn it upside down and give municipalities stronger powers.
I really appreciate you making time for the conversation today, Leanne. Thank you very much for being here.
Always happy to be here.
Leanne Caron is a Ward 5 councillor in the city of Guelph, joins us to talk about her concerns with Bill 5. Those concerns will land in the form of a letter if somebody reads it when they come back to Queen's Park in October, I suppose, because Bill 5 did pass before the summer break and the provincial legislature went into its summer recess. Do you feel as though the rich and the powerful have too much influence in the province of Ontario? Is there too much top-down government control? Are we unnecessarily weakening cities? That's kind of a paraphrasing of the argument we just heard from a municipal councillor in Guelph. Would love to get your thoughts on how you see us meeting those housing goals, how you see this provincial government behaving here in Ontario. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
We create laws to protect future generations from greed, from the rich and powerful forces that hold themselves above the law. So our letter to the province was just, please repeal it. We can do better. We can come up with another way of creating those economic zones without abandoning the rule of law.
Are the cities here and the governance within them to protect us from the interests of the rich and powerful above? I think the comparisons to the Greenbelt are appropriate here because, of course, we'll remember that scandal, and I think that's a fair word to use within the Ontario government in its early terms. I believe that was the first term, right? Now into the third term is Ontario Premier Doug Ford and the Progressive Conservatives here in Ontario. But there was a promise during the provincial election campaign of 2018 that the Greenbelt would be left untouched. It would not be opened to development. And then there was that meeting with developers, whatever, the video of which was shared, and it was made clear to those wealthy developers that, yes, the Greenbelt would be opened for development. And sure enough, parts of it was just lines drawn on a map and this, that, and the other thing. Familiar language, I know. And ultimately, due to the tremendous pushback, the development of the Greenbelt and any part thereof was stopped in its tracks. And yes, these special economic zones and unleashing Ontario's economy, the act that was passed just before the summer recess for our provincial government, is really talking about or has focused on the Ring of Fire. And we know, how many times have you heard somebody say, all these years we haven't even built a road to the ding-dang Ring of Fire? Like, come on here. But it's going to be, or it could be, and this is why I think the comparison to the Greenbelt is a fair one. It could be used for more than that. I think we do have to get moving on the Ring of Fire, but we had best, if we cannot at minimum, meet our obligations to our Indigenous communities and have meaningful consultation with them, then we have failed completely in this province. At minimum, those consultations must happen. Yes, of course, we need to not only get access to the Ring of Fire, but to the precious minerals and resources that exist within. It's, dare I say, critical to our economic future. But beyond that, this bill could lead to overriding rules and regulations in and around the Greenbelt. It could lead to the opening or the creation of a special economic zone right in your community as well, because the province will have the ability, in the interests of unleashing the economy, to override local planning and circumvent existing rules and regulations that were obviously put there for a reason. I find it incredibly interesting because you know that I'm a fan of amalgamation. I think that we have too many governments and, frankly, too many bureaucrats. No disrespect to bureaucrats, but here in this region of 700,000 people, I don't think we need to be governed by 59 different councillors and 7 mayors and a chair, and it goes on and on. You've heard me argue this before. But in response to that, our good friend Paul, who called just before the 10 o'clock news this morning, has asked me if I want to just see cities disappear and have, a provincial government to oversee all of Ontario. Let's just amalgamate all of the 400 plus municipalities and make it one big provincial government. And when I think about things like this, I think that the municipalities are a necessary step here. I do think that local planning and local governance is important. Just not as much local governance as we have here in the region. By the way, you may have heard Leanne Caron, the Ward 5 councillor in Guelph, mention the lands of the former reformatory in Guelph and how much time, over a decade, has been spent planning and how best to make use of that land. Well, I came across something last week that makes me raise an eyebrow and worry just a little bit more about the people who are in charge of spending the money we pay through taxes and how they go about spending that money. I'll share that story with you as we continue on the Mike Farwell Show this morning. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. It is a little thing in the grand scheme of things, I will admit, but you've probably heard me say this before. Something I learned from my great-grandmother: mind the nickels and the dollars will take care of themselves. Back in the day, it was the pennies, but we don't have pennies anymore. Anyway, Leanne Caron, Ward 5 councillor in the city of Guelph, who just joined us to talk about Ontario's Bill 5, the concern that she has about planning being overridden in municipalities, the important kind of check and balance that local planning has on sweeping power from the provincial government. And Councillor Caron made reference to the Ontario reformatory lands in Guelph, which for the past decade have been the subject of great scrutiny and planning. We've actually talked about it on the show, that these reformatory lands, there is a movement afoot trying to get those lands declared an urban park under federal jurisdiction as a national urban park. That work continues, but the bottom line is these lands are being used for people who enjoy nature, hiking clubs, etc. And I just came across this and had to raise an eyebrow because there is an old wooden trestle bridge as part in those lands, and people use it. There's signage now because it's not exactly in the best of shape. But it was learned that you could, through an engineering study, that you could upgrade and repair the bridge to make it safe and usable again for about $350,000, or you could demolish it for about $350,000. And Infrastructure Ontario has decided to demolish it for $350,000. And I just wonder why, given the option and the same price tag, you wouldn't preserve some. Like, why would you take? I don't understand. You can fix it for the same price you can demolish it, but Infrastructure Ontario says, yeah, get rid of the old wooden thing. No, don't bother upgrading it and repairing it so people can use it and enjoy it. Just going to take it away for the same amount of money. Curious that. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. You may recall a conversation we had earlier this year about a church in Waterloo, St. Columba, to be exact, basically the corner of Lincoln and Mayfield in Waterloo. And the city purchased that land from the church and will eventually create housing on that corner of Lincoln and Mayfield in Waterloo. I've long thought that these spaces, lands that churches currently sit on, would be great spaces to create more housing in our communities. And we're seeing it in a number of places and will, in the next number of years, see that at what is currently St. Columba in Waterloo. In the meantime, what would happen with the space? And earlier this year when we talked about it with Ward 5 Councillor Jen Vasic in Waterloo, whose ward the church is in, she thought there could be all kinds of creative spaces or ways of using this space in the years between the purchase by the city and the ultimate creation of housing. And it sounds like that is exactly what is happening, because there's a note on Waterloo Council's agenda tonight, a lease agreement for St. Columba Arts Space. And Ward 5's Waterloo Councillor Jen Vasic joins us to talk more about it this morning. Jen, good morning. Welcome back.
Morning. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Absolute pleasure. Let's start with Arts Build Ontario, which is the organization kind of behind the idea and, in fact, behind a new project in the region called the Meanwhile Space Pilot Project. What is that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a partnership between Arts Build Ontario, a nonprofit, City of Waterloo, Canada Cultural Spaces, the federal government part of this, and Why Not Theatre. And it helps. They provide incubation space, arts incubation space, taking a page from the tech sector here, like Communitech Accelerator Center, so that artists have space to work that meets their needs so that they can contribute their arts and craft to the community.
And this sounds like something that would have been exactly something you were envisioning when we talked about the St. Columba Church a few months ago. Between now and when it gets ultimately turned into housing, this is exactly the sort of project that could fit that space.
Yeah, it's certainly an option, and that's definitely what we unanimously approved earlier this year on council, in addition to having a long-term vision of housing, knowing that housing is going to take at least 2.5 to 3 years, probably a little bit more to get on that site realistically, and that's kind of an expedited time frame. But in the interim, what could be used for this? And arts and creative industry staff at the city and the other area municipalities in the region know that in addition to funding being the primary need in that sector, and of course in all sectors really, space is a huge gap for that sector. And we know that through a couple of reports that have been done in the last couple of years, and of course the arts community advocating for it for some time. And so this is such a great way to be able to both meet that need, which we already know is a need, but to really get kind of in the weeds and understand even more specifically what we need for that sector so that we can invest in it really effectively rather than in a piecemeal way, because we know that when we invest based on well-informed data, which is what Wing 404, and if we approve the lease tonight, what St. Columba would do, that will help us invest more smartly. And what do taxpayers in Waterloo want is they want us to be investing smartly, and they also want arts and creative industry. So this is really a win-win. What makes spaces and investments like this important to you as a councillor, Jen? Oh my goodness. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. And it's just not really surprising, I guess, coming from me, that arts have been widely recognized and are known to support individual resilience and also build community. And the arts have always been a mechanism for creating really positive social change through critiquing what we as a society are struggling with. And we're struggling with so many things right now. And so at what time could we need the arts more than right now? We always need them, but we especially need them in emergencies, and we are facing so many different crises and emergencies right now.
The report to council tonight recommends that the lease agreement be signed for a term of up to 3 years. Do we know, Jen, what Arts Build Ontario may be using the St. Columba space for?
Sure. Well, we know that at Wing 404, and again, I should say this is just coming to council tonight, so it will be open for debate and discussion. So it's not a done deal, but I am really looking forward to that conversation. So I don't know exactly what might go into St. Columba, but there are some kind of neat opportunities there because there's a bit of a, it's a church, so it has a bit of a theater space. And so there may be opportunities not just for artists to create and make and practice in that space for the projects that they've applied for, but there may be opportunity to open it up to community for performances as well because of the unique nature of that space. At Wing 404, we know already that it's being used for performance art, primarily music, dance, and theater, but there are some visual artists as well. And I know you saw the article in the CBC, Mike, and there's 50 artists who applied who didn't get in. So we know that there's if this lease were approved tonight, we know that this is going to get moving pretty fast, and there's already people waiting to get in there.
Look forward to the discussion at council tonight. Should be a good one. I think this is a great use of the space in the time between now and when housing can be built. So kudos to council for looking into this, and again, looking forward to the discussion. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me. Nice to talk to you, Mike.
Jen Vasic is the Ward 5 councillor in the city of Waterloo. St. Columba Church, Lincoln and Mayfield. The city purchased it several months ago. The property, the plan ultimately to convert it into housing. But in the meantime, why not use it as a space where artists can create what enriches us as a community? You know, I'm a big fan of what arts and culture bring to a community. So I think this is a terrific use of the space in the meantime. Ian joins us on the phone, who is the organist currently at St. Columba, or would that be formerly, Ian?
That's formerly as of last November, the end of November last year, we had our deconsecration service. But my first job out of Laurier, and of course I got that degree in pipe organ and composition, but my first job was St. Columba. I was there since 1991. And, it just brings tears to my eyes because it was such a family for me. I'm not an overly religious person, but this church family for me was amazing because, I would gig on weekends, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, playing in rock bands and playing loud music, and then get home at 4 a.m, only to have to get up at 8 a.m. to go do the church service. And these people were so welcoming, and they did so much for the community and outside of the community as well. They were amazing. And, I'm glad to hear that the arts is coming into it again, and I really appreciate that Jen's getting this set up. And the housing aspect is great. I hope that they can kind of keep the arts going because for me, St. Columba, Nancy Lou Patterson is kind of a well-known name as well. She did a lot of art for the church as well, and this is just great to hear. But I, of course, have moved on. I'm filling in, at All Saints in Waterloo as an organist now. But thank you for having Jen on and for hearing this great news.
Thanks, Ian. Good to hear from you, and a great story from a little bit of the history, a bit of a bygone era now. But here's the thing about using this space for the next several years for the arts community to flourish. Then when the time comes to turn that property into housing, which we know is so important, I would like to think that the art created there gains some traction, grows some legs, pick whatever phrasing you want, and then becomes something that can be moved into another space or a more permanent space in the city. So I think this is a win-win, and look forward to the discussion at Waterloo Council tonight. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, speaking of discussions, we have talked before about law and order on this show, right? And I get the sense that many of you, we want to be tougher, right, when it comes to the penalties associated with breaking the law. You should pay for that. So let's just say, and I'm not making any of this up, let's just say that you were to steal a toilet. What would an appropriate penalty for that be? Could it possibly involve jail time? We'll talk about it coming up on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. You're a law and order person, right? I know you are. We've talked about this before, and we talk about the penalties. They're just not stiff enough for this, that, or the other crime. So, a prison term for stealing a toilet? I'll get to that in a moment. But first, what do the city of Cambridge and the President of the United States have in common? Annexation, you say? Oh, he's here. Donald Trump has arrived for the G7 in Kananaskis, Alberta. He's here for the first time for an official meeting with our Prime Minister, Mark Carney, since, of course, he began suggesting that Canada be annexed and become the 51st state. Well, the city of Cambridge is annexing a part of North Dumfries, but this is all agreed upon and amicable, so don't worry about it. I was being a little bit facetious in the commonality between the city of Cambridge and the President of the United States. But a $3.5 million agreement has been reached, and Cambridge City Council will tomorrow night rubber stamp that and thus take over or annex 3 parcels of land that it borders with the township of North Dumfries, and that will eventually lead to Cambridge being able to put more development and housing on those particular parcels of land and take over control of them themselves in the city. Originally, they were going to do this for a $3.2 million exchange, but I guess North Dumfries Mayor Sue Foxton drives a hard bargain, and it's now up to $3.5 million. So get ready for the great annexation of North Dumfries Township. To the story about the toilet. And this is not stuff I make up. I always bring to you the straight goods on this show. And indeed, 2 men who plotted the heist of the infamous toilet have been sentenced to 2 years in prison. Now, it's not just your ordinary, everyday, average toilet, okay? It happened to be a toilet at Blenheim Palace in Woodstock, United Kingdom. This was swiped back in 2019, but it was also an art piece, a little bit of a satirical commentary on consumer culture. And it just so happened to be an 18-carat gold toilet worth $6.4 million. So we're not talking about your average piece of porcelain here, okay? $6.4 million toilet/art installation that these guys got away with swiping from the palace. They've been caught. They're going to jail for 2 years because they stole a toilet. I mean, that's one way of telling the story absent the detail, and it makes for a pretty compelling story. Did you hear the one about the guys that stole a toilet and got 2 years in prison? Yeah, those guys. Just leave out the detail that it was worth more than $6 million because it was made of gold. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. I know that you have heard of Oktoberfest, but are you ready for Bass-toberfest? Paul Kreuzenbrunner is a member of the KW Cambridge Bassmasters. Paul, why don't we just start there? Who are the Bassmasters? Joined today by Paul Kreuzenbrunner with KW Cambridge Bassmasters. Let's start there if we can. What are the KW Cambridge Bassmasters?
Thank you, Mike. We're a local fishing organization. We do pike tournaments in the spring and bass tournaments throughout the summer and fall. So we are a local bass fishing club. We do conservation work. We do cleanups around rivers and shorelines, especially at boat ramps. This year, we're really targeting all the boat ramps we go to do a cleanup to make sure that we conserve our waters.
Speaking of the fall and a bass tournament, then, we're here today to talk about Basstoberfest. Tell us more about it.
Well, I'm also a member of the Alpine Club, have been since I was a kid. My grandfather was one of the founding members of the Alpine Club. And so I went to an Oktoberfest meeting about a year and a half ago, and they were talking about all these other events that they're doing, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I'm a bass fisherman and I'm in Oktoberfest. I was in the Alpine Dancers for many years. Why don't we mix the two and go put bass fishing and Oktoberfest together and call it Basstoberfest? So that's what we're doing. We're doing an event called Basstoberfest. It will take place this year on September the 13th, 2025. It's a bass tournament that we'll be hosting at Wildwood Lake out by St. Mary's. It's only going to be 40 boats maximum. The tournament will run from 9 a.m. until 2 p.m., and after that, everyone is invited back to the Alpine Club for an Oktoberfest-style dinner, awards. We'll have a prize table. We've got sponsors lined up already. We're still looking for more. And it's going to be, we have a live band and a catered Oktoberfest dinner. It's going to be a fantastic day.
That dinner and fellowship at the Alpine Club would be worth it all on its own, but we know that people will be interested in this. And even though it's not happening till September, registrations are now open, Paul. How can people get involved?
They can go to the Alpine Club website, alpineclub.ca, go to upcoming events, and there's a link there for Basstoberfest. Scroll down, the information is there. There's a button you press to fill out your entry form. You and a boater and a non-boater, so people with boats, must have a live well because this is a live release tournament. Fill out the form, email it to our email address, which is really simple, basstoberfest@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook, KW Basstoberfest. People can look us up there. And once I get the entry forms and payment, you're on the list and you'll be partaking in a fantastic one-day event.
Remind us that website one more time where we can go to register.
alpineclub.ca, upcoming events, and click on the button to fill out an entry form.
alpineclub.ca. Paul Kreuzenbrunner with the KW Cambridge Bassmasters getting ready for Basstoberfest. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Mike. Appreciate it.
We are fast approaching 11 a.m. and your update in the 570 News Center. And this being Monday, a couple of things, well, a few, in fact, that you're used to. Rant or Rave, our Talkback Hour from noon to 1, reserved for those rants or raves today. David Drewe will be here at 11:30 this morning, just over 30 minutes from now, with Drewe's Views. And every Monday at 11, immediately following this update, it's This Week in Music History on The Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Oh, you could hear the change right there, couldn't you? Do I ever love me some Stars on 45 and what they brought to music? Please don't hate me for it. I mean, it was a little bit corny, but boy, oh boy, as a child of the 1980s, did I ever like what Stars on 45 brought to our industry. I'm not sure how much I'd like it today, but we'll tell you why Stars on 45 are applicable on This Week in Music History, something we do every Monday morning at 11 with our good friend and musicologist, Brian Allison. Don't forget to follow his Facebook page of the same name, This Week in Music History. Brian, good morning.
Hi, Mike.
How are you, my friend?
I'm awesome. How are you?
I'm also awesome. Thank you. And I do love me some Stars on 45, which we'll get to in a little bit. I'm curious how you feel about them, but that's for a little bit later. Let's start, if we can, on This Week in 1981 and Duran Duran.
Wow, what a record that was. So the debut album that Duran Duran dropped in 1981 didn't kind of hit home here in Canada and the USA for a little bit longer. It took them some while to get some traction here in the north of America. But this album was released in the UK in 1981, charted 2 singles in the top 10, Planet Earth and Girls on Film, and went on to sell a decent amount of copies in the UK before it was re-released here in Canada and the USA, and then it did chart here as well. So it was a pretty important record for Duran Duran. It really got their career off to the start that it was. And, my question has always been, was Duran Duran the most iconic band of the 1980s? So when I say that, I'm thinking about a band that came alive in the 80s, broke in the 80s, and had their peak popularity in the 80s.
So you would exclude the Police from that, maybe, because late 70s really when they started?
Technically correct.
Yeah, okay.
Although I will say that the Police probably were one of the best bands of the 80s. Absolutely. That's when they had their major, and that's their career ended in the 80s as well. But, Duran Duran was more specific to the 80s than the Police were. Yeah,
interesting question, and always gets you thinking on those things for sure. Not the decade that you would necessarily associate Black Sabbath with, but I love This Week in Music History only about a decade ago in 2013.
And, it was a great story for Black Sabbath because they held the number 1 position in the UK for their album 13 that was released June 16th, 2013. They also set a record for the longest amount of time between number 1 albums, which was 43 years, which, gives you an idea of how long Black Sabbath's career really was. Their first LP, or the second LP technically, was Paranoid, that was released in 1970. That held the number 1 position. And then they had to wait 43 years until 2013 for their album 13 to hit number 1, their 19th studio album. So 19 albums later, they come to number 1 again. And that was a pretty big deal for Black Sabbath.
I always associate Black Sabbath with the 80s and early 90s, too, myself.
For sure.
Yeah.
And let's put this in perspective. Justin Bieber's first hit, to put a Canadian slant on, What Do You Mean, occurred in 2015. So this means that in order to beat Black Sabbath's record, Bieber will need to chart a number 1 hit in the year 2058. Do you think it can be done?
How about this? I hope I'm alive to find out, because I don't know by that time, Brian.
Exactly.
It's funny. I was just talking to a coworker last week about a soundtrack that her family loves to listen to, and every song that comes on, she described as a banger. I think the kids mean that that's a good song. But it was a soundtrack full of oldies. And so I bring this up because I just love how a current movie or a current TV show can bring back a song from decades ago. She was talking about Forrest Gump, by the way. So a movie of the 90s that played a bunch of hits from the 60s. But in this case, we're talking about an 85 hit from Kate Bush that found new life just a few years ago.
And it was the kids that brought it back to life. So we have to thank them for that. So 2022, Kate Bush's 1985 single, Running Up That Hill, was released. Well, it wasn't even really released again. It was included in the Netflix series Stranger Things, which of course was extremely popular. And because the song was played repeatedly in the series, it jumped onto the charts again. And lo and behold, hits number 1 in the UK, which was a phenomenal success. It peaked at number 3 in the US and topped the charts in several other countries as well. But this was successful because it broke several chart records, including the longest amount of time for a single to reach the top spot. So when Running Up the Hill was originally released in 85, it didn't become a number 1 hit. It's still officially a singles release. 37 years later, 2022, it hits the top spot in the UK. Longest time that it took a single to reach the top spot, 37 years. Pretty impressive. And we can thank our younger generation of kids for embracing that song. I remember some young folks that I knew at the time going, "Do you know Kate Bush? Have you ever heard of her?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding?" Like, yes.
Finally, we had something in common to talk to them about, though, Brian.
Precisely. And
absolutely.
That's, again, the beauty of music history is that it never ends.
Certainly is. Okay, I'm not sure everybody is yet over her appearance at a Stanley Cup Finals game last week. However, Taylor Swift comes up on This Week in Music History as well.
Yep, June 19th, 2006. So Taylor Swift released her very first single, which was Tim McGraw, dedicated to, of course, Tim McGraw. and it was just ahead of her first album, her self-titled debut album, which went on to do pretty well. She had written most of the songs on that first album when she was in high school, and it kind of broke her in the U.S. It broke the top 40, peaked at number 6 on Billboard's Hot Country chart, and really kick-started a career that has become pretty incredible when you look at it. You look back less than 20 years. I don't know. In 2006, when this album came out, who could have predicted the meteoric success of Taylor Swift, that she would quite honestly be the biggest recording star on the planet by 2024 or 25?
There's no argument there for me. I mean, she's not my cup of tea. I don't care for the music. I'm not sure I could even pick out a Taylor Swift song if it was played for me, but there's no disputing her meteoric rise, as you've described it.
I've learned to love Taylor by osmosis. My better half is a very big Taylor Swift fan and plays her LPs quite a bit in the house. So I've absorbed the music, and I've learned that Taylor Swift is an outstanding songwriter. She's very, very poetic. Her songs are very deep and meaningful, and they resonate with a lot of people. So I appreciate her talent for that.
Brian Allison is a good friend of the program and our musicologist who joins us every Monday morning at 11 for a look back at this week in music history. Don't forget, Facebook page of the same name, This Week in Music History. You'll get all kinds of tidbits there. And one of the tidbits still to come here this morning is why we started with Stars on 45 and how they, at least for a brief time, revolutionized music and the things that we were listening to. And speaking of a revolution, whatever happened to this that came around back in 1948? That's still to come on This Week in Music History with Brian Allison joining us on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Every Monday morning at 11, we take a trip down a musical memory lane with This Week in Music History. Musicologist Brian Allison joins us for the conversation every Monday at this time. Let me just get this straight. Axl Rose was not married this week in music history, the year 2000?
Well, didn't happen. No. So the story broke in 2000 where a 39-year-old woman, her name was Karen McNeil, claimed that she was the wife of Axl Rose and that she communicated with him telepathically through a process called thought transfer. Okay. Prior to this, McNeil had been jailed for attempting to break into Axl's house, and the singer had retained a restraining order against her, which obviously was granted. Didn't end there. Fast forward to 2000, she sent a slew of letters to Axl's home, and then successfully broke into his home for a second time. When police arrived, she was in Axl's bed, waiting for him to get home. So, obviously, the restraining order wasn't working, and she was jailed briefly. And then, sadly, this wouldn't be her only incidents of stalking behavior. Years later, she stalked Justin Timberlake obsessively. One day, showed up at her house in a moving van with all her belongings, ready to move in. And Justin Timberlake also filed a restraining order against her as well. So clearly somebody with some mental health issues, but she was convinced that she was Mrs. Axl Rose.
He came home to find her in his bed.
In the bed.
Yeah.
Yep, waiting
okay.
for him to arrive. When the police came into the room, she basically said, "I'm waiting for my husband." And they were like, "He's not married to you, and you don't live here. You're going to need to leave."
Incredible stuff sometimes. Okay, this one takes us all the way back, like more than 75 years back, to 1948. But where would we have been without this format of music?
And it revolutionized the world. So 1948, Columbia Records put out the very first 33 1/3 RPM vinyl LP. And it was new. It was something that they thought, they weren't 100% sure this was going to fly, but they wanted music to be more accessible in a longer format play. So prior to this, people had 78 RPM shellac records, which basically allowed one song per side. You could play about 4 minutes per side. You have to flip the record after one, and then you have another song on the other side. That was it. There was no long play LPs. The only thing that was available back then was gramophones, which obviously didn't have the same resonance that a record did. So Columbia Records came up with this great plan of the 33 and a third RPM vinyl record, which would allow almost 20 minutes per side, multiple tracks, allow fans a longer music experience. And it was massively produced, and music fans could conveniently enjoy an entire album on one disc. So this remained the standard format for releasing music until the late 70s, when the cassette tapes came in, and then not too long after that, the compact disc, of course. So, but I mean, it's very fair to say vinyl's made the ultimate comeback, since it's now outselling CDs and has become the main format for non-digital music.
Probably not a surprise, is it? Just given that I think most people have gone completely digital. So if you're going to go for something physical, you go for that nostalgic feel and the richness of the sound, I would think.
100%. The camps are still divided. There are people who swear by vinyl that it is the only way to listen to analog music, that it's a richer sound, that it's how music was meant to be listened to. True confession, I'm probably in that camp. There's another side that still say that compact discs are superior, that the sound quality is better, that they're more durable, they're more portable, which of course they are. You can argue amongst yourselves of which you feel is the better way to go. But it's just telling to me that something analog has now become the way that people listen to music when we're living in a digital world.
All right. I started our segment today, this week in music history, with Stars on 45. And where else could it possibly have happened but 1980?
Loved it.
Me too.
You know what? There was some things happening in the late 70s and 80s where the Beatles' music was being brought back to the masses, but not in the form that the Beatles had maybe intended it to be. So in 1978, you've got the controversial release of the movie Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which starred the Bee Gees and Peter Frampton, and they redid a whole catalog of Beatles songs and, gave them a new sort of, not a disco feel, but there was definitely an updated version to those songs. And at the time, people went, you don't do that. Like, this is the Beatles. You don't mess with their music. And I think it proved at the box office, too. The movie and the soundtrack were a major flop. Then you fast forward to 1980. You've got the Dutch group Stars on 45. So this was a group of studio musicians. It was led by a fellow named Jaap Egermont, who was actually in the rock band Golden Earring. And they decided that they were going to put out these compilation songs. So they were medleys that had a number of hits in them, lots of Beatles stuff in there. And it took off. People loved these medleys, especially in the dance studios, in the disco clubs. This was a great way to bring some of that music of the past back into a modern sense. And it sold very, very well for a couple of years until people kind of tired of it and went, yeah, this is not really what we want to listen to. But, I look at it as this. It brought maybe some of that music from the past, particularly Beatles music, into a new audience. There were people young like me who were sort of thinking, oh, this is kind of cool. What's this song about? It? Oh, that's a Beatles song. I'll go back and listen to the original Beatles catalog now. So it was great for that respect.
I loved it. I really did. I mean, I think it's probably in the right place where it was kind of a brief phase of these medleys that were created, but it was just kind of cool even listening to them. I wasn't much of a dance studio or disco club guy, but even listening to which song they were going to weave in next, and they did a nice job with them.
Yeah, and again, they were popular. Like, people loved it. And then there was another series, I don't know if you remember the Hooked On series.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Those came out around the same time as well. So there was Hooked On Jazz, and there was Hooked On Disco, and there was Hooked On whatever. There was I think there was a couple of dozen different records. And it was the same thing. It was sort of repackaging music from the past with a modern feel to it, and trying to sell that to audiences. And people did like it. I mean, you can say what you want about it, that it was, schlocky, or that, it was sacrilege to be putting a disco beat to a Beatles song, but it was popular enough that people liked it, and it brought that music to a new audience. So in my case, I say it's valid then.
Speaking of the Beatles, and quickly before I let you go, just given the luminaries we lost last week, and Brian Wilson and Sly and the Family Stone, a very notable birthday for an icon this week in music history.
Yeah, last week was tough for sure. But this week we're going to celebrate June 18th. Paul McCartney turns 83 years old, so that's pretty impressive. Tuesday, Barry Manilow turns 79 years old. I think Ann Wilson is turning 75 this week. Anne Murray is turning 79 this week. Ray Davies from the Kinks turns 81. So lots of senior birthdays of our heroes to celebrate, and we should remember those people that passed as well.
Indeed, we will. Brian, as always, thanks for being here.
Always a pleasure, Mike. Look forward to talking to you next week.
Same. Brian Allison is our musicologist who joins us every Monday, 11 o'clock, for This Week in Music History. You can follow the Facebook page of the same name. Get these tidbits and more each and every week. This Week in Music History on The Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Well, we just finished This Week in Music History, a regular Monday feature. And following that regular Monday feature, another regular feature as former Conservative Party staffer David Drewe joins us for Drewe's Views. And this is one of those weeks where David sent me zero, none, nada, nil, zilch notes in advance. So you get what you get and you don't get upset. Next on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio.
Has anybody heard from Crazy Dave? Has anybody heard from Crazy Dave? Has anybody heard from Crazy Dave? I haven't seen hide nor shaggy head of that boy in 4 years. But you'd know him if you met him. Played harmonica like the cat lost his balls. Yep, Crazy Dave. Had a toothy smile as big as my hand. Always chewed on a toothpick or a long blade of grass, drank from the bottle, rolled the worst cigarettes, was impervious to insect bites. It's one of the best damn tree-planting highballers east of Prince George.
That is our friend David Drewe, founder, owner, operator, negotiating change, government relations, stakeholder engagement strategies, and a former Conservative Party staffer. He joins us every Monday morning at this time for Drewe's Views. David came today bearing gifts of the caffeinated sort, a nice cup of black coffee, exactly the way I like it, black like my soul, but no notes. So are you just trying to keep me happy and caffeinated, and then you're just going to run roughshod over the license of this radio station today?
Well, you told me that, I can say anything on the radio in context.
I think I said you can say anything on the radio once.
Big balls.
in context, sure.
Big balls.
Okay.
Big balls is the handle of one of the Elon Musk loyalist appointees at the Department of Government Efficiency in the U.S.
It is not.
It is. No, and this is just a quick drive-by. I'm not going to be expounding a whole lot on this, but it's kind of amazing when we are addressing senior government appointees as big balls.
So,
is this on his resume? Or is
I'd put it on mine.
Maybe it's ironic. But yeah, I just, as much as it's like, if this guy can be upper management at a federal American department, I can say his name on the air.
Okay. So
that's all I had. There's nothing more here.
Big balls remains, and Elon Musk has taken his balls and gone home. That's how this works.
Bingo.
Gotcha.
So yeah, just wanted to get away with saying that on the radio.
Okay.
Did you see the article about the privacy commissioner and the vending machines at UW?
Did I ever? And, credit to the student who first brought this to all of our attention.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to wonder how many other universities had this vending machine there and their kids just weren't bright enough to notice. Kudos to UW.
Yes, kudos to UW. And the application error was certainly helpful in that regard. But yeah.
Yeah, but to me, that would have been all stupid things broken.
True. I'm with you. You're right. Why can't I get my Kit Kat Chunky? Oh, because the stupid thing's broken. But yes, apparently this was facial recognition software in a vending machine.
Well, and this, when you read that article, it's really, really neat because the first 3/4 of the article is all of UW's defense is saying, well, it wasn't really facial recognition because it wasn't X, Y, or Z. We were able to tell gender and this, but it wasn't that because of, and it's all these really technical arguments, and the judge threw them out, or the privacy commissioner threw them out. But then you read, UW had no idea that this was going on until it became public.
Well,
and their defense is still not, hey, we didn't know. It's, yeah, but it wasn't really a problem. It's like, even if they'd gotten away with that defense, you'd still be sitting there going, okay, so it wasn't really a problem this time.
I don't know why the problem was UW's, though. It should be the vending machine maker, right?
Yes. However, the privacy commissioner's argument was that the university didn't do its due diligence in asking.
Fair.
No, but you invite me in here to do 570 radio, Drewe's Views. Do you fully disclose to people who come in the studio that they're also on Rogers TV sometimes? No, but seriously, this is the exact same sort of thing. Like, UW has a duty of care to the students on its campus at some level and didn't do the due diligence, so people's privacy were violated. If all of a sudden somebody's face ends up on TV because they didn't know it, like, what is the duty of care here? Like, if I'm buying pencils, do I have to make sure they're not smart pencils and go through an extra layer of paperwork now because of this?
David, our show is simulcast on Rogers TV Cable 20. So now you and the 44 listeners know when they call this show, they are also being broadcast over the television waves, not just the radio waves. We are all media right here.
Bingo, bingo.
Yeah.
But yeah, I found it totally interesting that they were trying to defend on the nuances rather than just saying, we had no idea. Like, we didn't know this was going on. As soon as they did everything right. As soon as this became public, they installed the machines. They're never coming back. I don't understand why they spent all that extra time on lawyers to say,
please don't sue me, first and foremost. And secondly, I still really want to understand why a vending machine operator or maker, distributor, wants facial recognition software as part of its design. The machines, David, have way too much power.
Well, it measured stuff like how long you were sitting there looking at your options. It measured if you were coming back. It measured...
To what end? To what end?
We are in this era where data is always good, even if it just sits somewhere for no particular purpose. Data, and that's what's scary about it. There was no idea of is this company going to be selling this data? You never got down to that because UW never had to get around to asking about it because they had no clue. So I just find it weird that they were sitting there defending themselves, not over we didn't know, but, well, even though we didn't know, we don't believe it was a bad thing anyway, even though we've already pulled the machines out and are never going to reinstall them. So, yeah, shootings in Minnesota.
Oh, my goodness. And politically motivated, apparently.
Dude posing as a police officer.
Shades of Nova Scotia.
But also it's like two state legislators in Minnesota. I mean, yeah, it's the home of the Fargo series and the movie, but no, you just don't picture Minnesota. Minnesota's that place where they have the noise accents and they have all the lakes and stuff, eh?
Great point. Minnesota.
Yeah, they talk more like Canadians than Canadians do.
Yes.
I've got really, again, nothing here except how long until we forget?
Wow.
I mean, not literally. Remember how long it was for the Trump assassination attempts to be pushed back? I don't picture this having the legs that did.
No, certainly here in Canada. It will obviously mean more in the homes of these people, the home cities, counties, whatever the jurisdiction was. But we could say that, David, about virtually every news story today, given the 24-hour beast, as I like to call it, which is the news cycle that's just constantly churning and constantly churning.
Yeah, but multiple political assassinations in one night. This might be worth a pause. But that's just it. We don't pause for any of these things, but that's just it. Trump getting winged in the ear, that lasted 3 weeks. I don't think this is going to last 3 weeks.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah. So Trump got his birthday wish, a military parade.
Lucky him.
Aren't you glad I didn't give you any notice of what's coming?
I'm so happy about that.
But yeah, for the first time, since World War II, possibly long before that, we were going to have a military parade in downtown Washington. And I got to admit, I'm a little bit both sides on this. First of all, absolutely cheesy. The fact that his birthday's on some holiday that makes it seem like it's not about, he could use that fig leaf to say it's not all about him. It's horrible. It's like a distasteful use of military grandeur and might. But it's not the main argument I've heard against this is everybody's like, well, that's only something dictatorships do. It's like, well, tell that to France. Tell that to Poland. Tell that to Israel. Like, a lot of countries do have a military tradition associated with this sort of thing, but we don't have royalty in the U.S., and that seems to be a little bit of the difference.
If it happens this year, what happens next year on his birthday?
Well, apparently during the last term, he wanted this, but there were still enough people in the Department of Defense who were just like, no, that's not what we do in America. That's what losers do. No, and seriously, this was the argument. It's like, you don't need to look strong if you're America. We are the most powerful country on earth. You know who has military parades? People who need to pretend to look strong. People who are insecure about their military strength and feel the need to intimidate. We don't need to intimidate. We're the U.S. But now there's been enough shakeup that they're just saying, okay.
Yeah, enough shakeup or just enough acquiescence to this man who wields all the power, and people just, it doesn't seem to be a whole lot of resistance.
Well, and that's just it. He doesn't wield all the power, but he is.
Yes.
Like, the courts sometimes are grossly enabling him inappropriately, in my view. Other times they are standing up to him, but they have no method beyond moral suasion to enforce their orders. So he is literally just ignoring the Supreme Court in multiple cases already. That shouldn't be happening, but Congress on the same, generally when you have 2 out of 3 of the branches of government, they can get over the third. He's managed to be running roughshod quite a bit over both. So it's almost like the Congress is not ganging up on the court so much as they're just cowering in the corner and pretending that they don't have a vote.
All right. Before I let you go, one more that you have on your list that I have not seen today from Drewe's Views.
Okay, so we should be watching committees in the House of Commons as it comes back.
I would love to, but they bore me a little bit, and I like this stuff.
But this is going to be the neat thing, because you are going to have, most committees will have 5 Liberals, 4 Conservatives, and 1 Bloc member now. Most of these committees will be chaired by a Liberal, so there'll be 4 Liberal votes, 4 Conservative votes, and the tiebreaker being the Bloc. So I'm not saying that the Bloc is going to be in a hurry to take down the government, but the government really didn't have to worry about any surprises or slowdowns at committees for the past while because of their supply and confidence agreement with the no party status, no more NDP. That's not there. So committees could be where Mark Carney fails. And it could be not just that he raised expectations. It could be just that the opposition gums up the works. And if they are going to, that is where they can.
It'll be interesting to watch for sure. See if it slows down the machinery of government. As always, sir, thank you for stopping by.
Were you afraid?
A wee bit. Okay, and it started with big balls. I wondered where we were going after that.
I wanted that to get mentioned one more time, but since you just did, I don't have to.
David Drewe is the owner of Negotiating Change, Government Relations and Stakeholder Engagement Strategies. Joins us every Monday morning, 11:30 for Drew's Views here on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
Time for the Local Business Spotlight on 570 News Radio.
And joined this morning by Faisal Susiwala, broker of record, RE/MAX Twin City, Faisal Susiwala Realty. Faisal, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How about yourself?
I'm excellent, thank you.
Glad to hear it. Let's talk about the market and what we're seeing here. We're about halfway through the year now, Faisal. What does the first half of 2025 look like in the real estate market?
Well, uncertainty was really the key this whole year so far. And, we're waking up to new realities every day, and uncertainty coming from south of the border, tariff talks, interest rate pauses after 7 declines. So we're just not in a very stable situation, I would say. But I do think that moving towards the end of the year, we'll see some more cuts and some stabilization happening.
What gives you that confidence?
Well, it's just the fact that we're seeing more inventory in the market right now, and all the directions are towards reduced interest rates by the end of the year. So I think that will help be the catalyst for more activity in the market at that time.
Faisal, I wanted to get your perspective on something that I've been hearing a lot about, and in fact, we talked about it already on the show earlier today, and that is the fact that Canada is in a housing crisis. How do you view this in your perspective from the work that you do? Are we in a housing crisis?
Well, my opinion is not going to be very popular, but let me give it to you straight. We're not in a housing crisis in the way it's being portrayed. Right now, we're seeing more homes for sale. Listings are up. Rental vacancies are rising in many cities, and prices in several key markets are actually coming down. So that's not what a supply crisis looks like. The narrative says that we don't have enough homes, but economists are saying that Canada's housing supply per capita is on par with the U.S., where housing is far more affordable than what it is here. So what's really going on is we've had a huge spike in demand driven by low rates and that pandemic with rapid population growth. And that's where we're seeing, this word crisis come up over and over. But the government continues to label it a crisis. It's not the consumers, because buyers and sellers are out there trying to make things happen. And there is really, when you look at, there's an oversupply of inventory in the market. So saying there's a crisis allows the government to roll out programs, taxes, policies that sound good in a press release. Foreign buyers, like that ban, that's less than 1% of the market. So, banning foreign buyers is not really doing anything. Vacancy taxes, again, not doing anything. Incentive funds, not doing anything. So these are all government rollout programs that they're using crisis as the crutch or the key word here to say this is why we need to do this. So really, we don't have a supply crisis. We have a crisis of affordability driven by the cost of borrowing, inflation, and an overreaction to demand spikes. So prices are adjusting now, and interest rates will stabilize or drop, which will see that balance return back into the market. So my advice at the end of the day here, Mike, is don't buy into the hype. Look at the data. And if you're thinking of buying or selling or investing, it's not a panic moment. It's really a planning moment right now.
You kind of read my mind when you talked about affordability, because the way you describe this with Canada having the same housing per capita as the United States, that's the first word that popped into my mind here, that if it's not a supply issue, in your opinion, it's got to be then it's an affordability issue that we're facing in the market right now.
It absolutely is an affordability issue.
Faisal, always appreciate getting your perspective. Thank you very much for being here.
Great talking to you. Take care.
Faisal Susiwala is a broker of record with RE/MAX Twin City. Faisal Susiwala Realty. Don't forget about his best-selling book called The Real Deal. You can find that on Amazon. And if you want to get in touch with Faisal himself, it's easy. 519-624-5555. That's 519-624-5555 or online homeshack.com.
The local business spotlight, where your business comes first. 570 News Radio.
Every Monday, you have probably grown accustomed to several regular features on the show, two of which have just been completed this week in music history with our good friend and musicologist Brian Allison, and then David Drewe, who stops by with Drew's Views every Monday morning at 11:30. Something else that keeps with tradition on this program is the next hour, because we set it aside for you every Monday, and we do it deliberately on Monday, because I think that Monday, whether you want to try to dismiss or deny the impact a Monday has, Monday lands a little different, right? Just like Friday lands a little different, Mondays have this vibe about them. So we thought that would probably be the very best time to allow you the opportunity to get something off your chest and onto the air, something that's been eating away at you, chafing your chaps, as I like to say. And so you can definitely take advantage of the opportunity to rant about that very thing. We used to, on this show, refer to it as the hour of rage. We have softened that a little bit. We're not, it reminds me of the Rage Index that gets released on a regular basis now. Does it come out quarterly, twice a year? Either way, this so-called Canadian Rage Index, it doesn't have to be. Rage is a strong word, I think. It's a charged word, isn't it? So it's not about rage. It's just about a rant. Maybe it's that story about the person in the neighborhood that's not picking up the dog poop, or the tree along the trail that has all of the poop bags hanging from it, because that's where people tend to throw them. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago on the show. Maybe it's the leaf blower in the neighborhood that really gets on your nerves, because you know how I feel about leaf blowers. A rake works just fine. You got a rake, you got a broom, you got 2 feet and a heartbeat. You got all you need, right? Anyway, it could be anything that simple. It could be something more significant. Thoughts on on the arrival of Donald Trump today and how Prime Minister Carney will handle him at the G7, what this all means, the goings-on in the Middle East. Those are big stories, for sure. Maybe there's something closer to home. It can be a rant because you're upset about it. It can be a rave because you're feeling great on a beautiful, sunny, and warm Monday, almost afternoon. The phone lines are open to you for your rants and or your raves right after this update from the 570 News Center on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio.
Take out the papers and the trash, or you don't get no spending cash. If you don't scrub that kitchen floor, you ain't gonna rock and roll no more. Yakety yak.
Don't talk back.
Just finish cleaning up your room. Let's see that dust fly with that broom. Get all that garbage out of sight, or you don't go out Friday night. Yakety yak.
Don't talk back.
It is your daily Talkback Hour where we provide you the opportunity to start the conversation. And on Mondays, in keeping with tradition here on the show, it is your rant or rave edition of the Talkback Hour. Rant because you're so upset. You are madder than HE double hockey sticks and you're just not going to take it anymore. Or rave because you've got something positive that happened to you that you saw today that you're feeling. You can do either of those things with one simple phone call to us. A rant or a rave at 519-570-2545. Star 570 and 1-800-570-5715. I would like to say again or share again a rave for the incredible families who are the Berries and the Schmucks. Berries, of course, of Berries Asparagus and Country Farm Store out at their farm in South Cambridge. Terrific family who always steps up for our Farwell for Hire fundraising campaign. And we had our final event, our final fundraiser of this year's campaign yesterday at the farm. And of course, Brad and Christine on board the Schmuck truck. We take the asparagus right out of the field, load it into the back of the Schmuck truck, and they put a delicious batter on it, serve it up in a tray with some garlic aioli. It's delicious, and we sell it for charity. And boy, oh boy, those families coming together the way that they did to make for an incredible fundraising day for us, raising more than $4,000. And you coming out, I mean, you got to enjoy some deep fried asparagus. Tough to beat, and it was a beautiful day for it. But just a great day all around. So grateful for the generosity of the Berries and the Schmucks and all of you who came out to support. So thank you very much for that. Huge rave. And we hope to have a final fundraising total to announce before the end of this week. We're just tying up some loose ends and doing some final accounting on that. And one more quick rave, because I couldn't resist this fantastic picture, just a little note in the weekend paper. And make sure you say either early today or on the day Wednesday. If you're in Listowel, you're from Listowel, you know the Lichty family of Listowel, in particular David and Mary Ann, who on Wednesday celebrate their 65th wedding anniversary. 65 years of wedded bliss. I'm positive it's been bliss, right, David and Mary Ann? But the note in the paper and the accompanying picture Too much for me to resist, so I wanted to make note of it on the show today as well. A happy early anniversary to David and Marianne Lichty, 65 years married. They are from Listowel. Make sure you wish them a happy anniversary if you see them between now and Wednesday when they celebrate 65 years of marriage. Let's get to the phones for your rants and or raves. John, you can start us off. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Michael.
Hespler Johnny.
No, I wasn't planning on calling in, but I just pulled into Timmy's to get, a cup of tea, and the lineup is like 9 miles long. People are ordering pizzas and beef Wellington and, everything. It should be restricted to like coffee, donuts, maybe a bagel. They're serving everything there. They gotta trim it down, Michael.
Johnny, you're not wrong. I remember a former host on this show was famous for saying it, just damn coffee. That's what he wanted in the drive-through line.
I'm with it.
Thanks, John.
Have a good day, Mike.
You too, my friend. Appreciate that. Yesterday, if I can take it back to the generosity of the Barry and Schmuck families for our deep fried asparagus event at Barry's Asparagus, we operated as a drive-through. Why? Because it's one item coming off that truck. Deep fried asparagus. You can get lots of stuff from the Schmuck truck when you see them around town at various events. But for our event, it's one thing and one thing only. So you know what you get? Yeah, I've always wondered, at minimum, because we have seen the fast food restaurants now with multiple drive-thrus, right? One of them should be strictly for the beverages. Come on with your coming on. That's an easy fix from where I'm sitting. Dawn, you're on Rant or Rave. Good afternoon.
Yeah. How are you today?
Oh, I'm fine. How are you?
Not bad.
Good.
I was just wondering about why does Donald Trump allowed into our country with a criminal record?
Oh, that's a very good question, Dawn. I think the answer to that is because he is the president of the United States.
Yeah, but he shouldn't have any more clearance than anybody else.
You don't think the president gets more clearance than somebody else?
No, he shouldn't. Not really. He's a human being too. You break the law, you break the law.
Yeah. And maybe it's not a strong enough crime that they decided to ban him. I don't know. But I really think the idea here is just some preferential treatment, Don.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks. I appreciate the call. I just would take you back, and I think we should always remember what Donald Trump, among the famous things that he has famously said, there was this.
I'm president, and you're not.
That's right. He's president, and you're not. And that's why he, with a criminal record nonetheless, can come into Canada and participate in the G7 summit, which is taking place. It's underway in Kananaskis, Alberta. Prime Minister Mark Carney, his first meeting with the president since Donald Trump began all of this, well, the first in-person meeting, all this annexation talk, the 51st state talk, and yet we welcome with open arms, well, maybe not open, partially open arms, the leader of the United States of God bless America. I think it just goes to show that despite the interesting behavior coming out of the White House, the sporadic behavior coming out of the White House, the United States is still a world power that many need. And you know what they say, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Donald Trump participates in the G7. Don isn't so sure that he should be. You want to weigh in on that or anything else? It's the Rant or Rave Hour on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Talkback on Mondays is reserved for your rants and or raves. Make the phone call. Let us know what's chafing your chaps or what's making you smile on this Monday. Back to the phones. Toll-free Jay. My man, good afternoon.
Well, I just heard last week that Mr. Bowen is stepping down.
Jay, I can barely hear you today, my friend.
Can you hear me?
Oh, so much nicer. Thank you.
I heard that Mr. Bowen is stepping down at the end of next year's season.
Holy Mackinac. Yes, Joe Bowen is stepping down.
So I just want to thank him for his years of service. And his radio will never be the same with Mr. Bowen going at the end of this year.
Mr. Bowen going.
Yeah.
There you are, my friend. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate the call. 44 years. I'm going to say this again, and I don't mean to be unkind. I mean to be honest, because that's how I like to operate. And there's nothing personal against the young man who just so happens to be Joe Bowen's son. And I've gotten to know a little bit through my work in the Ontario Hockey League. Joe Bowen's son, David, has been calling Sudbury Wolves games for a few years now. Does an excellent job at it. And I remember two things from last season. One was an article that showed up in the Toronto Star about Joe and his son following in the famous father's hockey broadcasting footsteps. And then not long after, David Bowen given the opportunity to be a part of the broadcast for the Leafs' next gen game, which certainly felt like, maybe sounded like a little bit of grooming somebody for the next role, if you will. But Joe Bowen will retire after 44 years in the chair as the play-by-play voice of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I know for certain there have been many a broadcaster, some who have come through the Ontario Hockey League and are now currently in the American Hockey League somewhere or anywhere else around, that would be very eager to get a chance at calling games for the greatest NHL hockey team in the world, right? The Toronto Maple Leafs. I just hope that there will be a thorough search and people with, listen, I'm not saying you're unqualified after a few years. David does do a very nice job. I think there might be more qualified. There might be people with greater experience to step into the role. But we shall see. It's not up to me to make the hiring decision. I, too, will miss Joe Bowen. I was never super passionate about Bowen's work. I do enjoy him, though, and I like the enthusiasm and the fact that he is a no-holds-barred homer. It's fine, because when you're the radio broadcaster for a team, you get a little bit more leeway in that regard than somebody who's doing a national broadcast, for example, right? Anyway, yes, Jay recognizes that Joe Bowen, as we talked about on the show last week, will retire at the end of next season after 44 years and 3,800-plus games called for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Imagine putting in that much time, that much energy, that much work, and not having even a Stanley Cup Finals game to call. So Joe is hoping that next year will be the one before he's done. Something else we talked about on the show earlier today, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this because I ended up exchanging a few emails about it, and I'm always happy to hear the other perspective. But we talked with Kitchener Mayor Barry Verbanovic about a renoviction bylaw, which Kitchener Council will be discussing today, and which will be the subject of a rally protest at City Hall ahead of tonight's meeting, because the report that staff at the City of Kitchener have created for Council to consider does not recommend the creation of a renoviction bylaw. And if I may paraphrase what we heard from Mayor Verbanovic earlier today, although some Ontario municipalities have created renoviction bylaws, they're largely toothless. It's nice to have them on paper, but Mayor Verbanovic seemed to be of the mind that it gives people a false sense of hope that their municipal government can, in fact, intervene in this regard and help them avoid a renoviction, which is an eviction from a place that you've been living because the landlord wants to renovate, and while renovating, you get punted out, and then when you come back, the rent is going to be considerably higher than it was when you left. There is no question that there are unscrupulous landlords that will create a reason for a renovation just to get a tenant out of there who has been paying rent for a long time and currently is well behind what the market is demanding for rent. So they might be paying $1,000 when you can get $2,200 for that unit today. So you make up an excuse essentially to get that tenant out of there, and then you can rent the place for more money, which is as unscrupulous as it comes. Like, it shouldn't happen. So to guard against that, is it up to the city to step in and intervene by some sort of regulation? Or is it up to the province, which has the Landlord-Tenant Act, which has created the Landlord-Tenant Board to settle disputes, etc.? It's provincial jurisdiction from where I can see, and certainly the city can ensure that tenants are connected with the right resources, advocate on behalf of tenants, but actually intervene. I don't know how much weight what the city does can actually carry. And while other Ontario municipalities have created these renoviction bylaws, I don't know how they will hold up if and when push comes to shove. Isn't it possible that potential landlords might say, I'm not going to do business in that city because they're just going to overregulate me, and all of a sudden your rental stock begins to disappear? Just a thought that I have. I'm glad I'm not a renter right now. I certainly am. I feel for anybody that gets stuck with an unscrupulous landlord, for sure. Something has to be done there, but I think the province has got to be the one to do it. But I'm always happy to hear your thoughts on how we even go about beginning the process of ending the practice of renoviction. Well, maybe a thought starter here on Rant or Rave on the Mike Farwell Show today. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Thanks to both Clive and Marlene for reminding us that diplomatic immunity applies to U.S. President Donald Trump and his arrival here in Canada to participate in the G7 summit, despite carrying a criminal record. Let's get back to the phones on Rant or Rave, your Talkback Hour today. Les, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike. How are you?
I'm all right, thanks. How are you?
Good, sir.
Good.
You prompted me to park the car and call you when you said the word unscrupulous landlords.
What made you motivated to call when you heard those words?
Well, as having been a landlord for 50 years, I would dare say that the good landlords far and wide outweigh the bad landlords.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly.
And the problem really is, Mike, it started back, when the NDP decided that they're going to change the rules on what you can deduct and what you can't deduct when you're renovating your building, how much you can deduct, and so on. And what that did is it set the landlord business back easily a decade, if not more, when you can't properly account on your books for a sheet of drywall, a brand new floor, doors that have been ripped out of the wall, and so on and so forth, when you can only deduct like 10% or whatever over 10 years, some crazy nonsense, right? So that alone created a massive problem. But what I think is a major issue, you see, is that the price of housing and the cost of borrowing has skyrocketed to the point where some people are actually paying people to stay in their apartment. And when the term renoviction has been applied, yes, I'm sure there's going to be people that are going to jack that rent from $800 to $1,900 or $2,000. But I think at some point, the governments and everybody else has to weigh the fact that why should a person who owns a building pay $600, $700 a month for you to stay there?
Les, I got to get to the news center for an update, but can you hang on for a minute? Because I'd like to go a little further with this.
Sure.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much. I believe this is really a good example of why this is so difficult. We'll continue on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio. Let's get back to the conversation we were having with Les about the reminder that certainly not all landlords are unscrupulous landlords. We all know that. Sometimes it gets lost in the narrative, though. And Les, you were just saying before that update, and thank you again very much for waiting, but that a landlord could end up essentially paying someone to live in the apartment that they're renting. What do you mean by that?
Well, I'll use your example. And I think I was driving, so I have to remember. You said either $600 or $800 a month the person's paying, so they're asked to leave because the landlord's going to renovate it, and then they're obligated to give them first right of refusal. So when they come back in, now it's $1,900. Well, okay, so you've just poured say $50,000-$60,000 into an apartment, and okay, so somebody can say, well, you don't have to spend that kind of money. You could have spent 10 or 20 or 30,000, and I don't know who has the right to tell you that, because if you're going to spend that kind of money, you're not doing it because you feel like kicking the tenant out and keeping them on the street. You're going to do that because it must have needed it, and that's just the way I think, because that's the only way I would do it. So what happens now is this poor person has got no place to live, because now the new rent is just for the reno, let's say, is $1,800, and then you've got the interest rate that has skyrocketed, so there's another couple hundred, and then you've got, like in Cambridge, you've got the water billing issue, right? So now the tenant doesn't pay the water, but runs the tub day and night, and enough to fill up a swimming pool, and guess who gets the bill? The landlord. So you've got people, Mike, and I've known over the past 7-8 years, I've known people, they're losing $10,000 to $15,000 a year between all the combinations that I was just talking to you about. Why on earth would you, A, be a landlord? Have you lost your mind? And why would the government expect somebody that has 4 apartments or something to sink themselves to that kind of money every year? You've got to be nuts.
So I think what you're getting at here, Les, is because I remember the discussion in Cambridge around water, and the idea was the bill should go to the property owner because the property owner is the one that profits as the landlord because they're renting out a second dwelling, let's say. And I think what you're getting at here is that it's not the most lucrative business. Perhaps that narrative is a little bit misleading as well.
It's totally unlucrative. It's totally unlucrative. Most people rent, make a little bit of money. They appreciate the increase in the value of the property, provided that they can fix it up. You drive by places, Mike, I'm sure you take a look at it and think, who the heck owns that place? It's a wreck. You know why it's a wreck? Because they can't fix it up, and the rent they're collecting doesn't allow them to fix it up. The fact that you have to bring back a tenant at the old price doesn't let you pay, and the water billing commentary about the landlord profits, somebody needs their head examined, because he who uses something is obligated to pay. That, I would equate that to, okay, well, I drive a car and I'm taking you to work or something like that, but you're going to put all the gas in it, pay all the insurance, pay the repairs to the car, but it's my car. But the person you're taking to work who doesn't own the car is going to have to pay all that. That's in reverse, but it's the same thing. Like, in what world can you use, okay, you turn on your lights. Should the landlord pay that too? The insurance. Should the landlord pick up your insurance? Like, it's insane.
So how do we, or where does the responsibility lie then, in your opinion, to stop the practice of renoviction?
It's difficult. It's difficult because, people always say, well, get the government involved. Well, number one, as soon as you get the government involved, somebody downtown or in Toronto or in Ottawa is doing something for you. That translates into higher taxes. The more they do for you, the higher your taxes. So the next comment is, well, we can't afford these taxes. They're on the moon. Oh, but I want a new pool in my in my park. I really want a tennis court. And so people don't understand that, you make demands, it costs money. The same thing in a house. This house has to have all the floors refinished. The walls have been battered up over 20 years. It needs a paint job. The faucets are leaking. I've met people who have water dripping through their ceiling and they're tenants. That's not right. That's not fair. They call the landlord, and the landlord says, well, I can't afford to fix it. maybe he's right. And then I find out that the person's paying $500 a month for a $1,400 a month apartment. Bingo. There's your answer. Now, whether you keep that poor person in an unsanitary building, because it is, now you're talking mold and mildew and all kinds of stuff, but right away the owner of the building comes back. He says, well, what the heck do you want me to do for $500 a month? And so somebody says, well, charge more. I can't because I'm not allowed. I have to do this. And here goes the circular argument. So the word unscrupulous comes in, I'm not even sure where anymore. It used to big time maybe 15, 20 years ago. But right now, the landlord business is not a business anymore. I've got several friends who had 20, 30, 40 apartments, sold them all, got the heck out of Dodge because of all these things that you and I are talking about right now. And then what happens is they sell them, and the next person that buys it doubles or triples the rent. Sorry about your luck, folks.
Les, I really appreciate you pulling over to share this with us today. It's great information to have. Thanks for calling in.
Well, thanks for giving me so long a time.
Happy to hear it and happy to get that information, because that is another side of it. If you own that building as a rental unit, sure, you're going to perhaps generate some income from it. But if you want to keep it in good enough shape that it holds its value, do regulations get in the way of that? Because the more you invest, the more you want to get back or maintain at the current cost of doing business, keeping a property livable. As always, there is more than one side to a story. And in this particular story, we're getting another side of the renoviction story. Rant or Rave on the Mike Farwell Show continues, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. On Mondays, Talkback is for your rants and or raves, and pretty decent rave from Les a moment ago around the narrative. Look, there are unscrupulous landlords, to be sure, but have we created a situation where landlords don't even want to be in the landlord business anymore? Back to the phones we go. Jeff, good afternoon.
Hi, Mike. How you doing today?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. So I just wanted to have a quick conversation. I've been listening to you all the time, and I'm a resident in the neighborhood of on Lincoln Road, where basically the church is being going to be eventually torn down, and units are being built there. And the city council meeting tonight, the first thing that I wanted to bring up as I guess a little bit of a rant, and I'm hoping I'm going to be wrong tonight because I'm going to the meeting. The last time I was there was when they put the bike lanes on Lincoln Road, and a bunch of our neighbors all got together and went down there. And a lot of my neighbors now don't want to go to this meeting tonight because of how disrespected they were from city council last time with the bike lanes, because it was fast-tracked and we weren't even listened to. So, I really am optimistic that doesn't happen tonight, because it's a very sensitive thing. I'm 15 years into that community. There's a lot of people in that community that have been there for 50 years. Nobody's opposed to the housing, but there's a couple things. One thing, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, I understand that what they're trying to do is fast track it and not have it be an art center. Is that correct?
No, my understanding that tonight on the agenda is the opportunity to make this an arts center for the next few years.
That's good. And my second comment is, and I am with you. I know that you are for these developments because we need them in our communities, and I get it. And yes, it's in my backyard this time. But when they're talking about putting 30 units on that property is the same size as my property for my house. That is too much, and it's going to really be detrimental to people that have lived there for 50 years and the community. I think there's got to be compromise, and I think our city councilors need to start looking closer at where they're putting these things and the density of the amount of places that are built. And I'm just saying I want people to start thinking about that. I want our city councilors to start thinking about it. And I want as many people to get down to the meeting today that live in my neighborhood, because we're not opposed to it, but we want it. We want to be listened to, and we want to make it so that it does not destroy our community. And, the wrong volume, the wrong numbers, as we know, can do that. And So just a concern. And like I said, I really hope that, we go down there tonight and there's open ears and they're going to listen to us.
I appreciate you calling in, Jeff, and good on you for getting involved to this level. I wish you luck at the meeting tonight.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that. Listen, I always come back to something, and I think it was Philip Mills, the CEO of Habitat for Humanity Waterloo Region, who said this on the show one day regarding a different topic, but I think it applies here. Just because you had your say doesn't mean you get your way. So council may listen, but still ultimately decide to do it differently than you would like them to do it. That said, I love the enthusiasm, and it very well, like, our cities have gotten themselves into an interesting position when it comes to fireworks, for example. 79 complaints last year in the city of Cambridge, and Cambridge is considering banning the sale of fireworks like Kitchener and Waterloo have done. 79 complaints. Does that mean that if Jeff and 78 of his neighbors go to a meeting or write a letter to Waterloo City Council, that's a critical enough mass of people to change council's mind on something? I don't know. But by all means, have your voice heard around the shape of your neighborhood today and in the future. And yes, if you think 30 units or whatever is going to end up on that former church site at Lincoln and Mayfield in Waterloo is too many units, then let council know your reasons for thinking that less is more appropriate. And good on you for getting that involved. I hope you turn out in good number to have your voice heard for sure. Over to Terry on Rant or Rave. Afternoon, Terry.
Hey, good afternoon, Mike. Did Mark show up yesterday?
What did I tell you would happen with Mark yesterday?
He was a no-show.
Mark did not make it out to our deep-fried asparagus event. Unlike you, unlike Nate Dogg, unlike producer Paulie, who showed up. There were a bunch of the old crew.
Yeah, that's right. It's nice to see producer Paulie again. The reason I'm calling, Mike, is... I rented briefly before I moved out here to Woodstock, and I'll tell you, I'll never rent again. It's just too many rules about this and that. It's not for me.
You were a renter? Like you were in the apartment?
Briefly, yeah. I rented when my marriage ended. I rented for a handful of years there in Kitchener before I moved out here.
So as a tenant, you thought there were too many rules?
Oh yeah, you couldn't do this, you couldn't do that. It's just not for me. Mind you, I'm mortgaging my house, so technically the bank owns it, but I don't think they care what I do with the house. They don't come to my door every month and say you can't do this, you can't do that.
Right.
I'll tell you, Mike, if it comes to a point where I can't keep my house, this and that, I'd rather go live in the woods in a tent than have to rent an apartment unit again. That's my opinion, Mike. So
okay,
it was interesting that fella called about unscrupulous landlords and this and that. But if you're going to invest in a property, you got to make some money a little bit or make enough. And I'm not a big fan of these regulations that the government puts on these landlords. But nobody's putting a gun to your head and say you have to rent something. You have options, mind you. It's limited. But where I'm coming from, I would never rent again.
Okay.
Anyway, Mike, it was nice seeing you again yesterday, and we'll talk again.
Thanks, Terry. Good to see you too. Thanks for supporting our Farwell for Hire deep fried asparagus fundraiser yesterday at Barry's Asparagus with the Schmuck truck, who was helping cook it up. And now you got both sides of it. You got a former landlord who said the regulations were so onerous and it was so difficult to maintain a standard at the property that you could maintain value within it, that he didn't want to be a part of the landlord side of it anymore. And Terry on the other side, granted, these are one story from each side, but as a renter, he said there were way too many rules. As a tenant, I didn't want anything to do with it. What's this about? Less government? I don't know. Rant or Rave continues on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. And right back to the phones we go to hear next from James. Good afternoon, James.
Well, Mike, hello, and to you and all your colleagues who have ever sat in front of a microphone, I hope that never AI takes the place of a pulse of a person sitting behind the microphone at 570 News. So that said, what was I listening to on the news last night? Please don't tell me that was an AI-generated voice.
Uh-oh. I'm afraid I missed it, James. I'm sorry. What were you listening to? What happened?
Well, the intonation of the language being read had a slight edge to it that led me to think, oh no, you guys aren't using bots to do the news reading, are you?
And it was on this station?
It sounded not like some of the youngsters who jump out of the college program and jump in front of a microphone because, well, first of all, you're the king of never saying or ah on the radio. And if you hear that on the radio, on a news broadcast, you know it's a human being. But it just sounded too perfectly, almost perfect AI, so I just had to ask.
Okay, well, I will look into it. I'm sorry I didn't hear it, and I don't know that there are robots reading the news just yet, but I share your concern about that possibility / eventuality. No question about it.
I hope not, never. All the best, buddy.
Thanks, my friend. I appreciate that. We've actually been working on getting somebody from the AI world to talk about their concerns. And this is somebody far more learned than I, okay? And I admit, I mean, I'm old enough that I get worried about some new technologies, and I'm not supposed to be. I'm supposed to embrace them. But the whole AI thing, I will not tell you a lie, it kind of gives me the creeps. Like, these things are a little bit much for my liking. I will also add, because I know this and I don't think it's a secret, I've seen it, I'm almost certain I've seen it, yes, I have, in trade magazines, et cetera, that cover our industry of broadcasting. We, as a company, are experimenting with AI announcers. I don't know what they sound like or where we are at in that experimentation, but to my knowledge, they're not being used yet. Well, here at the radio station, for sure. If that's happening at this very station at any time of the day, that would be brand new information for me. But I share concerns around it. And gosh darn it, you don't make human connections with computers / robots. And the fact that those computers / robots are making some quote unquote human connections, that's where I start getting scared. But this is just me. The future is scary. Been great chatting with you today. Let's do it again tomorrow, okay? I'll come back at 9 in the morning if you do too. I'm Mike Farwell. Bye.